PCA of Greater Chicago is interested in providing our contractors with as much useful information as possible now that the Illinois marijuana law has gone into effect as of January 1st of 2020, particularly with the reasonable suspicion procedures and what our contractors should follow in order to make that process work efficiently. Bill Heffernan is co-founder and co-president of Employee Resource Systems, or ERS, which is the membership assistance program provider to our local 130 members who are employed by our contractors, and also for the EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program that can be used for contractors and the non-bargain staff. Thank you, Bill, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Effective January 1st of 2020, Illinois became the 11th state to legalize recreational cannabis. However, our association's industry-wide drug-free program, tied directly to our collective bargaining agreement with UA Local 130 and administered by ScreenSafe, Inc., prohibits cannabis to be found in your system. So the question on many of our contractors' minds is, what happens to an employee bound to our CBA if they test positive for marijuana during our random drug testing?
It's a good question, and as it stands now, the way this is going to work is the way it has worked for the last several years. If a member of the local or a participating contractor that has their non-bargain for employees tested tests positive or is non-compliant with the testing program, remember, someone can be non-compliant with the testing program and they may not have tested positive, but if someone's non-compliant because of a positive result for marijuana, they'll be referred to the Members Assistance Program or the Assistance Program. Our counselors will get them in to be seen by a counselor within a day or so. We'll do an assessment of their situation, and based on that assessment, we will make a recommendation for some level of intervention. Now, it may just be a simple educational program. It may be an online educational program. It may be outpatient counseling, intensive outpatient counseling. But our role in that situation is to do an assessment, to do a thorough assessment, understand what the problem that person is having is, and then based on that assessment, connect them to the best and most appropriate in-network provider of care so they can get the resources and assistance they need so they can get back to work and diminish the problems they might be having in their life.
Understood. Thank you. So let's take a question one step further and ask how the new Illinois law addresses how contractors are to deal with employees who come to work impaired, who are reasonably suspected of being under the influence of marijuana on the job.
This is a hard issue for contractors, and it's a difficult issue for contractors because I've worked with the trades now for many years, and my experience tells me that the last thing that any foreman, any superintendent, any person in a leadership position on a job wants to do is to send someone for a reasonable suspicion drug test. In my experience, when someone sends a member or an employee for a for-cause drug test, that is principally driven by the fact that either it's too hard to ignore, the person's impairment is so significant it can't be ignored, or they genuinely care about that person. They know that person has a problem and they think that referring them for a test will force them to begin to get the help they need to get their life back on track. So I think we'll continue to work with employers to help coach them in situations where if they have an employee who shows up to work impaired, we'll work with them to help them figure out how to proceed. Now, the basics are pretty simple. Reasonable suspicion, according to the rules of evidence, is more than a hunch. So if I come back from lunch, I stagger when I walk, I slur my speech, I behave in a way that's not customary for me, that for my supervisor would constitute a hunch. Based on that hunch, it is my hope that that supervisor would go and then talk to that person, and then based on that conversation, discern whether or not there was more than a hunch. Did that triggering event lead them to conclude that there might be impairment? If that happens, if there's the triggering event and then something more than the triggering event, then you have reasonable cause to send someone for a test. And then you can work with ScreenSafe to get that process in motion, where you document what's happened, you document what you saw, the workplace behavior and the workplace performance, and then you contact ScreenSafe. You identify the closest and appropriate collection facility. You transport the employee to that collection facility for a test. You wait for them to be done. You transport them either back to the workplace or to their home, or you arrange for them to get home. The thing I want to reinforce is that the company should never allow an impaired person to leave the job site on their own. If you've decided that you think I'm impaired, that I'm not able to perform my duties safely and effectively, you're going to follow the for-cause testing procedure, the reasonable suspicion testing procedure, but once that process is over, you need to make sure that I get home safely.
Mm-hmm.
And should I be one of those rare, difficult people who says, I'm not going for this test, stick it in your ear, then what you want to make sure happens is that you arrange for transportation for me to my home. Now, if I say to you, S.J., I got myself here, I'm going to get myself home.
Right.
The last thing you need to say to me is, Bill, please understand, if you insist on leaving here in your vehicle, I'm going to call the local police department. I'm going to describe your card to them. I'm going to tell them your license plate number, and I'm going to tell them that you're leaving our job site because you were confronted about being impaired, and I'm concerned about your driving home. Now, the reason you're going to call the law enforcement, your local law enforcement, is because that phone call is recorded.
Right.
Should, God forbid, I get in an accident on my way home, you will have evidence that you made every reasonable effort to prevent me from driving my car home. But the other side of that is, if I come to work and I'm impaired, I've probably had a problem with drinking and or drug use for a period of time. And I may have gotten a DUI. And so the last thing, at a DUI in DuPage or Cook County is going to be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 for the first one. The second one's more.
Yeah.
So when you say to me, Bill, you have to understand that if you leave our property, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to be strongly disincentivized to leave the property in my own vehicle.
Right.
Because I don't want to take the risk of having that cost.
Right. Excellent points. Thank you so much, Bill. So now that our contractors have reasonable suspicion, that's where they are. How do they go about documenting those facts?
So we provide to all of the contractors, and we can make available to you for the website if that's something that's appropriate, a sample documentation form where they can just print off the documentation form. One side of the form is a checklist, and the second side of the form is a narrative summary. We want to be really careful with supervisors and managers and foremen and superintendents on jobs. We want them to go through the checklist form, check off the things that apply in terms of what they observed with regard to the employee's behavior and or performance. And on the back, we want them to document what they've seen using the narrative form. But we never want supervisors to draw conclusions or to make assessments or to make diagnoses. If I come back from lunch and I am high, or maybe as a coworker or a colleague or a supervisor, you know that I like to get high. If you write on the form that Bill's a real stoner, that's going to be a problem when we get to arbitration or litigation.
Right.
So you really want to focus on documenting workplace behavior and workplace performance and leave out any assessment, any diagnosis, any conclusion that you're drawing based on what you've seen.
Right. You're really not qualified to make that call,
Right.
is really what you're saying.
And S.J., if I can add something, I want to just make the point that one of the things that we're all going to have to learn is that, since this is new, is that with marijuana, the signs and symptoms are a little different, and people who haven't used it in a long time may be trying it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the consequences will be difficult to measure
Right.
as we start
And
this
they're going
process.
to vary quite a bit too,
Right.
based on the
Right.
person. Okay, so now you've taken the necessary steps as a contractor. You've documented your notion of reasonable suspicion. What are the next immediate steps you're to take as an employer?
The next step, if you've documented that your reasonable suspicion, you'd call ScreenSafe, you'd let them know where you're at, what's happening, you'd ask them where the closest collection site is, and then you'd arrange to get that person with a companion to the collection site so they can provide their sample.
Okay, so assuming that the results come out positive, I understand the whole notion of non-compliance, but this individual is not tested positive for marijuana. What is the responsibility of our contractors at that point in terms of discipline and ultimately firing an employee for non-compliance of the drug-free policy?
It continues to be as it has been. They get referred to the assistance program. We do an evaluation. We get them back to work. We clear them through ScreenSafe so they can return to work as quickly as possible.
And I should reiterate here that the Local 130 and PCA Drug-Free Alliance has not removed marijuana from the testing panel. So it's still a prohibitive substance. It doesn't matter that it's now legal in the state of Illinois as of January 1st of 2020. That has no bearing on this. We're continuing as though the law never changed, except for now this new situation regarding reasonable suspicion.
And if I can just say,
Please.
I mean, the union and the contractors in this jurisdiction have been very committed to providing people with assistance and support. So this isn't, it has not been my experience working with this group that there's any desire to find and punish people. It's about helping and educating.
Right. We've invested a lot in these individuals, and we want to keep them in the industry.
Right.
We want them to be safe and healthy. Could you please review the do's and don'ts caution with respect to disciplinary action and explain the role of the EAP or the MEP also?
Well, the do's and don'ts are really just, it's a list of things we encourage supervisors to do and to avoid doing. So we don't, if I come to work and I'm a little impaired and you sit down with me, we discourage you from having some long discussion where you act as my counselor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're focused as my supervisor or my foreman or my superintendent. You're focused on my workplace behavior and my workplace performance. I'm either meeting your expectations or I'm not. And your job as my foreman is to hold me accountable. So we discourage supervisors or foremen from being in a position where they're counseling people about what's going on, or they're trying to make up for them, or they're trying to hide them. I mean, years ago when I first started working with the trades, it wasn't uncommon if someone showed up to work a little bit hungover or a little drunk or a little high, that foremen or superintendents would put them off in a corner or have them sweep a floor. If I'm a skilled tradesman, I make a lot of money, and I need to perform in a way that makes me earn my money.
Right.
And so, you know, those days are no longer very prevalent where you're hiding people who are skilled tradespeople.
Right. Understood. I really appreciate all this timely information. And if our contractors have additional questions, where do you recommend that they go?
Well, I would hope that if a contractor has any questions about the Members Assistance Program, the Employee Assistance Program, drug or alcohol information, that they give us a call. They can certainly call me directly. Just call our 800 number and ask for me. It's 1-800-292-2780. Or I would also encourage them to consider going to our website. If you're a member of Local 130 or a participating contractor with the PCA and you use your login information, you go to our website, you log into the website, you can go onto the website, you can find a vast amount of information and resources about drug and alcohol use, impairment, and assessments. You can also find information on dealing with troubled or difficult employees. There's drug education on our website. Actually, supervisors or contractors can assign, or actually the apprenticeships, some of the apprenticeship schools can assign people to go onto the website and do the alcohol and drug education program that's available through our website. An added bonus this year because of Illinois' new Workplace Transparency Act that requires people to do sexual harassment training is we have an online training program for sexual harassment on our website.
True.
So there's a lot of resources on our website that are available to your contractors to use as a resource.
And I should mention that the website again is www.ers-eap.com. Username is PCA and the password is also PCA. In addition, as you mentioned already, Bill, the phone number is 800-292-2780. And also, if you ever would like to call the PCA office for information, that's 312-563-9526. And you can visit our website at www.plumbingcouncil.org/PCA. I'd like to thank Bill Heffernan from ERS. I'm S.J. Peters. I'm the Executive Director of the PCA of Greater Chicago and the Plumbing Council. I encourage you to follow up with either Bill or myself or Lucy Manos at ScreenSafe if you have any questions. And thank you very much.